When my fears for our daughter's safety exploded into an argument about rights, I warned him if she dies because of his vote, I will never forgive him now. We're walking a fine line between love and a divide that could shatter our family. I, 33, and my husband, 37, were having a discussion about politics, and we got onto the topic of our daughter, 7, which led to me expressing my fears about her rights and bodily autonomy. For context, my husband votes Republican, and I have always considered myself independent, but recently have been shifting very far away from my younger, carefree attitude toward politics. I love him very much, and I know for a fact that he loves me, but I have started finding his opinions naive and lacking depth. He is a very good man, though, and has in the past changed his mind on several things when confronted with them. Further context: my cousin lives in a strict anti-abortion state and almost died a few years ago when the doctors waited until she was actively dying of sepsis before they decided it was okay to remove the dead baby from her body, even though it had been dead for weeks beforehand. So needless to say, I had a wake-up call and sharpened up my principles until they are very shiny and pointy. Last night, when we were talking about abortion rights being healthcare, I lost my composure out of sheer terror about the possibility of a similar disaster with my cousin happening to our daughter, and how I struggle to understand how he doesn't see the problem with his party, and that in fact I think he is being willfully ignorant to the danger I and my daughter face in favor of his idea about making economics work for our family. I also said that if our daughter dies due to something preventable, like the ability to get a timely and much-needed abortion, or gets shot to death in school, that I would let my own mother rot in a nursing home. She votes R2. And I'd never be able to look him in the face again, which would basically be me disappearing and divorcing him. I was crying and upset and explaining how scared I was, and he asked me in a very hurt manner if I'd actually abandon him like that. I am truthful to a fault and said that I would, perhaps out of a sense of illogical grief and betrayal, because I'd know my concerns were not taken seriously and that they had abandoned common sense and did nothing to attempt preventing a very real consequence of voting away mine and my daughter's right to health care. I equated it to a slow-motion car wreck with our daughter in mortal danger and him just watching it happen, because it doesn't involve his own body. I know he needs to hear it, but I think I was too raw and open about it to steer the conversation in a healthy way, and I have a very blunt manner. I apologized this morning for saying that I'd leave him, even though I knew I would, and he tentatively accepted it. And I said we'd talk about things later when I articulate things in a healthier way. But I'm at a loss as to how to make it known how deadly serious this is to me, and not make him feel like I'd abandon our marriage over just any sensitive topic. I do not need people telling me to leave him. I don't think I know how to make it any more digestible and be clear without going nuclear over something that has not happened, as our daughter is too young to suffer that yet. The rub is that I am the person who is changing the dynamic of our relationship, and I'm beginning to understand how politics breaks up families. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Ask him to name scenarios that he would accept the premature death of his daughter. Ask him to name what life-saving healthcare he would be willing to deny for his daughter based on principles. If he can't name any, ask him why is abortion different. Use your cousin's story as a hypothetical for your daughter, but be as graphic with it as you can be. But in all honesty, if you must labor so much to convince him to care about yours and your daughter's health and well-being, then this should also serve as a wake-up call to you. And if I were you, I'd take back your apology. You meant what you said and only apologized to comfort him. I say let him be uncomfortable. Why are you so concerned with the bluntness of your words and not concerned about how quick he is to dismiss you? Comment 2. I'm the daughter of a Republican dad and liberal mom. I'm honestly not sure why they are still together, and think it is because they are older and retired. Luckily, I live in a liberal state that doesn't take away human rights, so I think it allows my mom not to think about it as much. It's been since Trump that I've really seen the division between them. I don't really have any advice to give you, but the perspective from a daughter in a similar type of situation. I love my dad, but I don't have a lot of respect for him because I don't think he actually understands what's going on. It hurts as a daughter to know my dad votes for a party that is actively doing bad to a lot of human rights, mainly because he believes in the economics of Republicans. I also hate having to be around my parents in the evening, especially if they are watching the news. My mom definitely holds frustration for my dad and takes it out by saying mean things to him, and I feel like my dad doesn't take it seriously because I don't think he actually understands how scary this is for certain people. I wish my parents would do therapy together And honestly, you guys should probably do therapy together if you actually want to make your marriage work without resentment growing. Comment 3. The worst part is all these men talk about the economics of being a Republican, when all the data shows time and time again that those economics are absolutely horrible for 99.9% of us. They literally will cause harm to their families and others because they believe lies and don't want to hear otherwise. Comment 4. I understand why you don't want advice to leave him, but you may have to accept that as your reality simply because your morals, values, and ethics are no longer compatible. But of course, do everything you can to try to reach him. Obviously, deep down, you know him and know he has the potential. I went through this with my own husband years ago, and I wasn't nice about it. It was pretty much a deal breaker for me then, and now, and he was too busy being smugly libertarian on every other issue, so I had nothing to lose. That said, once he extracted his head from his rectum, I've been happy to explain things from my perspective as long as he's willing to actually listen. He's not perfect, but he gets a lot that men generally don't or take for granted. I do know that one of my big points was that his views meant I couldn't trust him. Women's reproductive rights sure don't affect men directly, but by not caring about the issue because they care about the women in their life, they are sending a clear message that women are interchangeable appliances. He either cares about the things that are important to you, or he doesn't actually care about you. He can't claim to love and respect you and want a future with you if he's voting against your basic interests. That is hurtful for you, but you are allowing him to center his feelings hurt because you threaten to divorce him someday. He's hurting you now, but he wants to focus on his potential future pain that would be a direct consequence of his behavior now. Let that sink in. He is telling you exactly where you stand with him in multiple ways. Further, he's deluded if he thinks voting for Trump Republicans is going to actually be good for his finances, maybe in the short term. The reality is that any gains he makes will be offset by the tax overhaul and tariff system. If your wealth is dependent on your income in any significant way, Trump winning would put your income at risk as women are forced out of the workplace and into a housewife role. If your income depends on either of you working overtime, Trump is giving employers a way to deny overtime premiums through creative scheduling, a lot of tax deductions and credits that primarily benefit low and middle-class families are being eliminated while those that benefit the wealthiest are left intact or strengthened. We've already had a preview of his roided-out trickle-down economy from his first term. Your husband is being incredibly short-sighted. Comment 5. I'm not sure what you are trying to achieve with this post. You say you don't need people telling you to leave him. However, the harsh reality is, in this situation, that is your present and your future, as long as you stick with Republican men. He is not a very good man when he puts your daughter's and every other woman's life at risk by voting for people who want nothing but destruction and power. That doesn't change, no matter how much you gaslight yourself that you can somehow fix him or see reason. Sorry to be so blunt about it. Comment 6. This. If a man is a Republican, if he plans on voting for the GOP candidate, even if Trump keels over tomorrow and is replaced by someone who's less openly insane, if he is willfully ignorant, he is not a good man. Full stop. He can help old ladies cross the street and volunteer at a soup kitchen as a hobby, but he's still not a good man because he does not actually care about women. OP, you think you can fix your partner. You cannot. Nobody can fix another person. You can't be the person who is changing the dynamic of the relationship when you're not the bad actor. You should not have to explain why rolling back women's rights is fucked up to get someone to see that. He already knows and does not care. Update. We had a serious discussion. I went into more detail about my concerns and fears, and it was intense. I was much better at presenting the case. I gave him several hypotheticals that involved a particularly gruesome set of circumstances involving his balls. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty, but the gist was to shift his perspective. I told him to seriously consider carrying a tiny fetus in his ball sack, and the fact that the risks were things like exploding balls, sepsis, etc., and the myriad of ways he could end up dead, permanently physically injured and disfigured, or unable to produce a fetus in the future, if he didn't have the option of removing the fetus from his balls. I asked him if he would even want to take the risk, and he agreed that he'd be very likely to remove it, unless he was ready for those risks. I asked him why in the world would I be justified in telling him he has to carry it no matter what and where. It might only be removed after it starts to explode out of his ball sack or his organs start shutting down. Once he seemed to start grasping the enormity of what abortion encompasses and seeing why it's very important to not let unknown people control what options you have with no medical reason. I told him I lost a bit of respect for willful ignorance and that I can tell he avoided thinking about it because he knows in some way that it says something about his character, and I resented having to even give him a hypothetical in the first place, and that if he cares for me and our daughter that he should automatically actively be using his empathy skills every day. I explained how I have demonstrated the capacity to care about and evaluate gender issues he's brought to my attention in the past. That was a difficult part of the conversation. I also told him that I do not trust him to always make good decisions for us, and that I feel alone in shouldering those responsibilities. He listened and let me talk a lot. He asked if I was going to leave him, and he was clearly nervous and bracing for the worst. I told him I'm not taking drastic steps like that, but I certainly will when it comes to keeping our daughter healthy and safe. I also started to say something about how I know I would lie to him in a heartbeat in a situation where our daughter needed an abortion or medical care, and he interrupted me to say, "You wouldn't have to lie because I'll be driving the car or buying the plane tickets, and we will all go anywhere we need to." Y'all, I burst into tears. We ended the conversation and he said I laid a lot on him and he needed a break, but said he had things to think about. I didn't push any more politics, but I think I feel like my trust has been slightly restored. I'm not getting my hopes up, but I think he realizes that he's wading in dark and dangerous waters when it comes to our futures. Relevant comments. Comment 1. All of this reminds me so much of that scene in the show The Handmaid's Tale where June finds out that she's not allowed to access her bank account anymore, and that her husband has to sign something for her to get birth control pills, and her husband dismisses her concerns, basically saying, "That's okay, I'll take care of you, no big deal, it's fine." It's easy to dismiss a concern when that concern doesn't seem to affect you directly. And the problem is that no matter what we say, no matter what example we give, some people will always have a degree of removal from an issue that can affect their understanding and their empathy. My own husband is empathetic and caring, but he doesn't understand why I, someone staring down the barrel of menopause, is so angry about abortion access restrictions. He doesn't understand why I, a woman in a loving marriage that doesn't look likely to end anytime soon, is upset about the end of no-fault divorce. Or why I, as someone with no connection to prison, is upset about our horribly inequitable carceral system. And he will say he understands my objections, but then he's like, why bother wasting energy getting upset about it? I don't know how to get across to him that just because it doesn't ache us right now, doesn't mean it would out later. I also don't know how to get across to him that it's very difficult to see attacks on our ability to get a divorce or access an abortion as a direct slap against me as a woman. If someone punches someone else like me in the face while staring me directly in the eye to show me that they would be doing it to me if they could, that's very upsetting. But they aren't looking him in the eye, so he doesn't see it that way. Comment 2. I admire the heck out of you for having this huge conversation with your husband. Thank you for making the case for all of us, and thanks for sharing with us. I hope your example can help others who need to have serious discussions like this with people in their lives. Comment 3. I'm glad you have this talk and that he is starting to reconsider his decisions, but I hope you are very clear with him that this isn't about him setting aside his views for the special case of you and his daughter. Other women are entitled to the same respect and autonomy that he wants for his daughter. If his position is that he will pack the bags and buy the tickets for y'all, but he will nonetheless continue to vote for all other women to be oppressed, he's not a good man. OP. We talked about the women getting turned away from emergency rooms across the country because they were having pregnancy complications for babies they likely wanted to keep, and it was like I could see a gear start cranking in his head. Total silence, like he'd never considered that a lot of women who seek emergency abortions actually wanted their babies. Comment 4. My husband and I had this discussion before our first was born. This was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the writing was on the wall that it might go. We live in a very local city for my job, but things weren't going well, and we were debating moving. I told him that as long as kids were on the table, moving to a red state was out of the question. I refused to move to a place where I would not be able to get access to care that I needed and end up dead just because we were trying to have a child. My husband brushed it off. One of his close family members is one of the most prominent OBGYNs in the country. He said that when the worst came to worst, she would help us out. But I said, how exactly? Imagine I'm suffering from sepsis and about to die, and the hospital I'm in literally will not perform an abortion. What exactly will she do? And he stopped in his tracks. That ended the discussion right there. My husband had simply never had to consider it before. At the time, we weren't seriously thinking about kids, so he hadn't really thought it through. In any case, in a few short years, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I ended up pregnant with our first child. I'm currently pregnant with our second. We still have regular discussions about potentially moving. Never once subsequently has he ever considered a red state. Comment 5. So glad he finally understood the reason why we need to vote the way we do to protect our bodies. But is he going to back up what he says he now understands by voting the opposite of what he's done before? Comment 6. I hate that many men only recognize women's bodily autonomy when they become fathers. I hope you really talked to him about voting Republican this year, otherwise this whole thing is really moot. Comment 7. I'm glad he understood, but he still votes Republican. The Democratic Party is still right-wing. No, they are not leftist, unless you're talking about the progressives. But your husband deliberately chose to vote for the more racist, ableist, sexist, bigoted in every way party. The only reason you had this discussion is because it affects you and your daughter on the basis of gender and sex. I'm not going to tell you to get a divorce, but you should probably take a good look at your own morals and principles if you still think it's okay for him to vote the way he does, especially given everything that has happened since 2016. Editor's note: OP seems satisfied with her discussion with her husband, whether you disagree or not, so is unlikely to update. Therefore, I have marked this conclusion.